disease theory.
Okay, it should have worked.
It should have sun.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, let's see. It's on video. I'm really scared. Okay, yeah. Got that.
All right, cool.
Yeah. I'm
Do
good?
this.
Yeah.
Plan the Republic of India, Islamic Republic of Pakistan not to eliminate their nuclear arsenal. That's Karl 18 discrete climate in South Asia. Only solution key completely abolishing nuclear weapons. Harmless only effect way to ensure non-nuclear nuclear weapons. Incredible between daily all the time. I don't know nuclear training machines, central steps, nuclear conflicts, pulling measure, armed control human should be encouraged. Indo-Pak war escalates and goes nuclear. Only elimination of arsenal checks. First preemptive counter-force strike. India would do despite NFU, but Pakistan considers the two creating user lose pressures. That's Treaty Act 19. Indian defense where India's here to enter the future principle. Circumstances India's counter-force gave the option to target Pakistan's nuclear force. India's ability accurate missiles in larger numbers also includes ability to monitor Pakistan's nuclear force. The capability to attempt to destroy Pakistan's entire nuclear arsenal once we widely parent striking if it's going to create a new direction with India, Pakistan, more instead to go first and go massive. Second is Kashmir, long-running tensions and skirmishes and rapid escalation of conventional conflicts. That's what CAR 19 India impacts of long-running tensions speed across the confrontational threats from the nuclear war invested grant for the substance worlds like these nuclear threats when two countries capability to the close the world's from nuclear war terms start conflict nuclear weapons out this conventional military fires conventional conflicts could be escalated possibly nuclear change made through waiting war to corruption clause constantly for the escalation would be beyond leadership controlling nuclear commercial for the war to solve Kashmir seems like it's long about retaliation to yes in the conflict. Third, aggression, new imbalance and uncertainty, arms races and international actors can't check this. McDonald 19. A suicide bombing in Utah this week with airstrikes even the Pakistan's first aircraft when nuclear power against another uncharted waters. Western countries preoccupied as Paris new and critical elements willing to raise stakes and unable to Western countries to intervene. Able to disappear by decided against restraint no longer tolerating attacks. Pakistan no longer assume weapons strikes from Indian retaliation. U.S. lost credibility allowed in previous crises. China released our former paper decision by Brexit. U.S. seeking Pakistan for review to where the town and living police for pressure on about Pakistan developing battlefield nuclear resolve their battle low threshold for use of nuclear weapons. The Pakistan government struggling to stabilize the economy. Fourth, Pakistani officials Article 370 controversy deep establishment shifts through nuclear escalations like this. 1919 Pakistani ambassador to Pakistan retaliating with the Islamic for the international forum station on Article 370 Pakistan to have students having nuclear war. If the people determine genocide, they are Pakistan was covering the nuclear test value held loose in the country's action that causes when actually good ties with any appears to be in favor of nuclear wars. Worrisome cause reference to the modern version of Pakistani nationalism. The Pakistanis have to be itself at a loss. Fifth, perception Pakistani belief India will protect in Indian overconfidence triggers escalations clearing rate. 19 murder declared India destroying launch conventional missiles like 70 steps out the nuclear alert allowed our India alleged Pakistani support terrorist groups that killed tens of thousands of civilians. Pakistan emphasizes building more loose nuclear weapons on battlefield restricting India's superior forces for India's extra radar imagery and can target much Pakistan with land sea cruise missiles onions and like they have people disarm Pakistan in the near medium term and security interests such as like the accelerated arms race possible to disarm and engineer Pakistan near the integration for strike India over cross Spain these execute to counter for strike India cannot. Six, nuclear submarine treaty can be duty weak communication devolution can exponentially increase the risk of miscalc and accidents. That's only 18. Pakistan initiated to add nuclear weapons to its navy direction to nuclear tried nuclear submarines to increase risk of border control by jury impairment officers. Pakistan test fighters from nuclear war have been used to see weakens the chain of command which means the risk of accidental nuclear war increase exponentially. The two wars and missiles have already been something to communicate to our one-way submarines on its own offensive hostile attack nuclear submarines they began to be able to fire nuclear strike launch a devastating sector was the first nuclear launcher even possible at a time to de-escalate each would attempt to entire arsenal population centers. Nuclear war between India and Pakistan destroys the world. That's Johnson 19 nuclear spin burn sizable areas 30 million tons super blackout 30% of sun 5 degrees of cold use retained probably 30% globally. India tries to precipitation drops to the United States decline 50% India Pakistan is up 125 million fatalities 10% behind the last ice age and mass starvation. Even limited nuclear war immediately kills hundreds of millions in 1 week. That's seen all 19. Even one nuclear weapon explosive to a great deal of damage, 15 killed every single 700,000, 100 killed ever 200 million fatalities done starvation war, 15 killed weapons, lead to fatalities in World War II, more 100 killed weapons, direct lethal treatment, high times 20 fatalities occur in a single week. Framer. The standard is maximizing expected well-being. First, only consequential things explains degrees and wrongs. To break the promise to be interferential, it's not as bad as break the promise to take a dying person to the hospital. Only the consequence to break the promise explain why the second one is much worse than the first. Intuitions outweigh the foundational basis for any European theories that contradict intuition or mostly the policy we can't directly determine why. Two, actor specificity. Governments must aggregate because the policy benefits some and harm others. Only non-arbitrary way to prioritize by helping the most amount of people. Actor specificity comes first because different agents have different ethical obligations. That's Mac 4. When the decision falls more, other issues have to be considered under advocacy. May not score the most advantageous policy deciding more extends one mean less for another. Scarcity is the source of the ethics source or asking just how to stand for the resolution of interpersonal policy should question maximize welfare policy but only in terms of resulting utilities. Third, phenomenal introspection. It's the most epistemically reliable historical moral disagreement over internal conception morality to the question of race, gender, class, religion, etc. Prove the fallibility of non-observational based ethics. Introspection means we value happiness because we can determine that we each value it just like in observe a lemon's yellowness. We can make those judgments about happiness. Fourth, no intent foresight distinction. If we foresee a consequence, it becomes part of our deliberation, which makes it intrinsic to our action since we intend it to happen. Fifth, reject calculates. 8-point empirically united with individuals and policymakers carry out effective cost-benefit analysis of these, even if decisions aren't always perfect, it's still better than not acting at all. B-point is theory. They're functionally nibs that everyone knows are silly, but see the app. It moves debate away from the topic and actual philosophical debate, killing valuable education. More advantage stuff. Deterrence is wrong. First, history doesn't disprove their analysis of the cargo conflict is wrong. That's Carl can 18 rationale does not guarantee leadership not used to increase provide grants to escalate the conflict nuclear superiority and dominance causing test their returns credibility reason violations can fight threats such as with physical camera for other fractured crisis and help with nuclear tragedy time cargo will not consider representative of future crisis. 2. Reason Indian test failures debt credibility that's Satya 19 credibility is highly dependent countries capability so test Agni 3 raised doubts about reliability and rest of Indians determined that submarine derivative for Agni 3 is playing nuclear subfailing and single Pakistan and China India's arsenal is reliable it's holding to pushing on over during crisis averaging trying to track use of weapons escalator strike without fearing massive retaliation. Our nuclear winter study is best rise all is garbage. That's 19 fires from program criteria, met 2 target not made fuel loaded, small generated fires from Mars, not 5 target location, or fuel is a river golf for selecting like India or Pakistan, fuel values 100 times as well, top 50 targets in India, Pakistan, this accumulation, clearly not rotate, not declared for future station, or listed against parameters, results not be duplicated, researchers have commanders, suppressed vertical development, including stable boundary layer, driving here in short simulation, there's no evidence for that assumption, clip volcanic eruptions, both the results are erroneous, to recommend all sulfate aerosols, process eruptions, completely different physics, and black carbon, they not simulate fire storms, densely populated urban areas, and how things make, they not reproduce or firestorms, Extinction outweighs Palmer 15 recent asteroids is the most important thing in the whole world. So many people exist in the future. Millions of trillions of recent asteroids is the most important thing. Even while being these possible, you can only 0.001%. That's much weight we should take into account moral uncertainty. If we're only 1% for one thing matters from the moral uncertainty, we can actually is the most important thing in the whole. All moving possible moral needs from church. We should try to save the world. NFU doesn't solve. India considered preemptive strikes as defense. Fisher 17. India considered preemptive strikes as defensive, making nuclear would make nuclear change more winnable and thinkable.
Do you mind if I like just get the part of the song reference, the instrumental part of CX?
Sure it is.
Promise you. You know what? It's fine. 30 minutes. You good?
Yeah.
Starting now. Why would app?
The app is a good idea.
Why does that mean you should vote app?
Because this is a debate and
Okay,
there's
so
a resolution.
so what is a good idea?
Affirm that resolution, and
Rex,
if I
what
affirm
is a
that
good idea?
resolution, India and Pakistan eliminating nuclear arsenals.
Okay, so I'm saying like abstractly, what is a good idea?
Something that maximizes, well, in the context of government, something that maximizes well-being.
Okay, what is a government?
It's like a physical, or not like physical, but it's like a group of people who govern a country and make decisions about
Okay,
the
well, are those
policies of
good?
that country. Why are governments good?
Yeah.
The app doesn't take a stance on the ethicality of governments. It just says that
Okay,
governments
so
that currently exist should
Does
take
your framework
that
maximize
action.
pleasure, minimize pain, or prioritize death? Or prioritize stopping death, I guess.
The former, or the framework is maximizing well-being.
Okay, so what is well-being?
So I guess like people's happiness.
Happiness? What is happiness?
So like in the context of that, that would be like people not starving after the nuclear war.
Okay.
That's something that makes them not happy.
Okay, cool. Can you give me an example? Like, how do you quantify happiness?
So like, what do you mean quantify?
Like, my happiness versus your happiness.
So our argument is that in the context of governments, they don't have to make those sort of interpersonal decisions because they can evaluate broader aggregates such as the risk of a nuclear war.
Okay, how many
causing
headaches? How many
massive
headaches does it
suffering.
take to equal a broken leg?
That's what I was just sort of saying. Like in the context of majority of governmental decisions, it's not those kind of trivial random examples. Rather, it's
Okay,
more
so
easily
how many?
quantifiable
All right,
in
so
context.
look, I live in Houston, right? And they
I don't know that.
Huh?
I don't know that.
All right, well now I do. All right, so
I don't trust you.
okay, we can have that debate. So I live in Houston, and there was a trade-off that the government had to take into account, right? So either they let like these like dams open that flood my area where I live, or like not
Sorry,
flood
I
like
didn't
a medical center. So like a lot of homes got flooded. How do you determine like what happiness outweighs and why something outweighs?
I'm obviously not familiar with the policies of your local government in
Alright.
Houston. I don't know the particularities of that instance.
That's
What I
pretty
do know about is that India and Pakistan eliminating their arsenals would increase well-being more than it would hurt it.
Okay, that's fine. So let's go to the Palmer evidence. That, can you explain the warrant and the evidence?
Palmer?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, so it makes a few arguments. First is future generations, so many possible people could exist. That means there only needs to be a small risk that their lives have value, or even if we significantly discount their lives and consider current people more valuable, the sheer amount of people that would exist in the future would still outweigh. Second is that sort of no ethical theory completely says that consequences are irrelevant. Even people like Korsgaard admit that there's certain exceptions to their theory, that if there's like a high risk of extinction happening, that we should sort of ignore those ethical principles. Third is there's sort of a moral uncertainty argument, since we're not certain exactly.
Where's the moral uncertainty argument?
Quote, we should also take into account moral uncertainty, even if we were only 1% sure that well-being matters. For moral uncertainty, reducing existential risk is the most important thing in the whole world. All minimally plausible moral views would converge that we should try to save the world.
Nice. Okay, that's fine. Alright, so two in case.
I'm going to use my stand.
Yes, please. Thank you. I'm just gonna apply all. What round is this? Oh, that. Okay. Alright. It is.
You said 2, right?
Oh, what?
You said 2, right?
Yeah. Case starting with a couple overview arguments, then the offense. Actually, sorry, the Palmer evidence, then a couple overview arguments, then the offense. Okay. Let me know. What?
Sorry, still looking.
Wait. I forget.
I'm good.
Is anybody not ready? Okay. Interpretation of further must defend that all states also eliminated nuclear arsenals. To clarify, you cannot defend any substances violation specified standard. First textual, the use of bare flow in the rules, which means top includes all states on a substance. Carlson 77. Rebel likes to determine and represent the distinction between generic and bare flow is indefinite, blah blah blah. Rebel treats all instances of properties of things that impacts eight points of confusion outweighs. Carlson with this book, just means conception of the structural languages, period by provided professor over the course of 40 years. That people I go out pragmatics for example, use pragmatics compared to legitimate semantic in terms of topic, but there isn't even eligible comparison. See one restriction regardless of pragmatics for not committing intent the resolution you're following not following a preset resolutional burden, which means judge cannot, but us since Lulu wasn't now, this means judge can independent of the constitutional pragmatic justification limits and ground links any combination of states, including Russia, Israel, China, and allowing any more permutation of them exposed by Barbara Nafta, coming thousands of individual which I'm massively squeezing engagement as you have to answer the front line your one off won't be preparation to break neck up because marginal differences in the advantage, although you could take that ground and distance like certain states like India, North Korea, or the US with a few generics from the abstract states that TV assaults could have let Japan as the advantage of holders having networks being voters versus fairness of voting because axiomatic to everything that activity allows people to not be able to participate now drop their beta sure contribution second North Korea going down RVI because it's logically when picture being fair be sketchy better maximally abuse practice probability is something going on in the RBI. Also, that's why we try to subsidize education so they don't always just go back and collapse to the theory debate. Rather, we can just get rid of theory and then just go back to education. The use convenient terms because reasonable, just arbitrary, no valid, by church. Also, that's why we have a race to the top and have better debates in the future. So we can have better. No, second off. Desire for life rejects identity, which we can never fully reach, urgent the political to determine identities that are legitimate. Zero the balance vote for the debate with the best method of traversing its fitness. Element 1. Policy can be for symbolic to the environment which we inhabit or the other social realities from somewhere. This was the identity which we never succeed in coinciding because we can only be seeking for ourselves as matter. Closely, gap that politics of desire and politics of future, politics of futures with the bill for the purpose of any negation. There's something to find the child's essential in order to fulfill desire for life regimes curse out political assessment 2. Politics imposing negativity, the realization that the child's embodiment of future in order for fusion must be social order in the logic of future, no baby, no future, then inherently structuring in the political relies on negation in order to sustain itself with forcing its time to defeat the position of ontological examination where criticism can have over the Stanley 11. The laws made possible through reduction into core balance, the overclose of not end life, all specific all career life, the career that is so unimaginable, one is forced out of the human resides in life, where the career and a habit zone of death, the overclose balance, one is nothing, and ignores statistics regarding material products, appearance, they're here to have the truth situation means only, or ontological claims means the reality overkill, Stanley 2. Statistical evidence meant to prove that violation actually happened, measures that dictate the way we remain to understand harm that thing is statistically say, a job statistic ensure that had result never found as yet, never recovered, the cause of death can never be determined statistically with the fragment to copy the alternative traversing death, our full affirmation, career negativity, and rejected one is seen behavior traversing fitness and realizing the structural positionality for identity is element 3. Rather than rejecting negativity, consider embracing the refusing system of hope itself, nothing can ever have insurance to the symbolic over the actions result to define itself, expulse the actions that social order itself, creed is business, I think that politics firms, creed is expulse sort of learning is fantasy, this sort of and psychoanalysis both falsifiable, and accurate. It's current hard fun. Attacks of cycling also have been challenged methodology and empirical ability of cycling and concept in neuroscience research indicates that cycling and concept self-image, repression, and empirical identification. Cycling has been supported by empirical reason for DSM access to pathology. Now, already now, first reject method 8 even state can be considered the links as well that after the states is supposedly better for the low links of these cycles are working with the states that making progress might be better for some. There's always to be at the expense of deacon identity. Trivial. The people working in the same zone solves the deficit permutation, though it allows the states to control what it wants us to learn, and it will know how to resist and create radical change. Also, very impactful to their frame. We expand our questioning operates why it exists now. Seconds rejected for material impacts. The only way the pillars will limit different identities exclude them based on material attributes abstract away from material impacts. They can take away the political ability of press people, which is exactly the alternatives. Does that people the abstract just puts on material impacts happen the first way. We in our theory probably pay superior to explain why and how material laws happen. See what's that database nothing but abstract from materials. We've seen in the term the people are dying. The one issue would just be we talk about some hypothetical limitation. The after we get a trophy on alternative we do anything plus around deep one is that some level of attraction is that there's no way we walk and shows everyone who's a person is pulled out. There's don't AC obviously 8 points your after analysis or stars from the large course epsilon and all often to like in the future. Seconds also the case where better explanation will cause AC opposite impact specific which solves vaccine bonus self CDF your after does nothing but also everything trying to come known to cause return solve actually about the root solves so focus on the right also feels as if nothing happens reject was enough with the role about conclusion stand for reason first the standard let's speak self lever no nobody framing that nobody can session reality that's consistent by no ethics to all subject to the role about that speaks of the just obligation individual or the others precludes examination normative right role about the question of ontology frame both presupposes epistemology ontology compounds make conclusions about thinking about whether even one of those presuppositions but nothing consider ontology versus sequence traversing if it doesn't matter of deconstructing symbolic epistemic periodic engagement on the frame we need to deconstruct the reality world first now understand now first the identification of feelings what issue was the practice of feelings of ludicrous I think saying the actual methodological acknowledge making intellectual meaning in a background for the when I got presented as strong 90 no legal thought will tell us if there's not the slightest change amount of the opposition to it doesn't seem concerned with the character and that people the feelings supposed to make ignoring complexity the active assumes we can imagine some perfect world like playing this whereas in real there's the different legal barriers some protesting unique parts that happen so like the app has a gay marriage without legal right push up but you practically until the mind that change either than it is undercutting grassroots pedagogy see one's double mind either the arms want to share truth and they can solve the impacts before they control the levels of power which means voting on presumption over their arms are constructive or personal arms which means voting on personal also framing so they don't get a permutation everyone even you can conceive in a world that was both the alternative to artificial distinction necessary to fully flesh out the entries of both methods to hold them their method being different is only way to create copy nuance proposals being the method debate they should hold them to their method defending the one AC by itself since anything else justifies and endorses the being the which endorses best scholarship it should be debated on my method first year as people just the infinite conditionality like permutation laws the after every day infinite obviously the one area which use that sentence of one C discourse diagram deep one method assumes the ability for the ideal world actual law students to generate affect about the world and inevitable non-actualization their imagination personally students say cycles and understand themselves the world always untangible and all the case problem first on the plumber is one is that life doesn't matter it's a fallacy or just because life is where we came from doesn't mean we have any obligation to actually care about life which means extinction has no impact and secondly this is just a link to the critique which means that you do not get away the impacts of extinction against the critique insofar as the question of whether or not for futures is about the idea of a healthy future generation something that's inherently future which means that it is a link to the critique so they have to beat back the critique in order to gain access to their extinction impacts or the weighing extinction and the third is the collapse of a debate about forming there is no moral uncertainty if we win the debate which means if I win the role of that means that it's a question of that is the what is true which means if I win in this debate the role about that means there is no moral uncertainty which means it's a question of the debate within this round. This only one debate is that which takes the palm reference. Do not vote on the palm reference now. The rest of the first on the case proper, firstly preemptive counter, first strike the run about the NFU. There's no counter for this department. PhD 19. No argument full out false order establishing the issue for rhetoric counter to deliberately declare it. Knowing our strategic that we got away and change India's strategic things not a result of technological drift. India up to hitherto under technology. India demonstrate technological prowess that deliberately strangle technological advancement in order to demonstrate counter value. Cut the card counter value and second the Kashmir the dispute doesn't escalate. Read every afternoon proof of posturing out where there are not escalatory here 19. At least in both countries are useful use of political agenda. Government sometimes accommodate each other. Pakistan, India, a couple bombs the harmless place just satisfy public opinion. Skip the rest of the evidence for the cut the card there. Skip the rest of the evidence. There's no impact on either arguments as far as the nuclear war does not lead to extinction. That claims are vastly over exaggerated. That's a PhD on TS Econ 17. Claims exaggerating the nuclear weapons have become commonplace. It by no means uncertain that detonation would do away with that life. We're still despite having nuclear are playing them over 2,000 times around 500 nuclear weapons that were unleashed in the atmosphere. This includes the world's largest detonation. One physicist explains only 1,000 earthquake called nuclear winter. And inflict the ecological annihilation of weapons alone would have to detonate that thousands of thermonuclear devices in a short time. I'll read that. I'll send that card one second. And I'll send a new doc as well.
That's fine. I just need the card.
Cool. Alright. Just one second. I'll just like reply on the body.
That's fine.
Alright, it's sent.
Looks good.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
Status of the alternative.
Dispositional.
Condition.
If you make a permutation, I can continue.
Is the plan possible to roll the alternative?
It's not a voting pick.
Cool. How does your theory explain why India and Pakistan are going to go to war?
Explains violence through the concept of futurism and through the concept of explaining why the political excludes certain deviant bodies.
So how does the political excluding certain deviant bodies explain why India and Pakistan are going to go to war?
It explains conflict in regard to violence against those who are deemed the Western man or deemed queer.
So how does violence against queer people explain India and Pakistan going to war?
Sure. The argument, I don't think you're understanding what the thesis of the critique is.
So
the argument that we explain violence through the concept of why
Yeah. So how does that explain the form of violence the app is isolated, i.e., India and Pakistan going to war? For example, how does how does your theory explain the Kargil conflict? For example.
All right. Firstly, I'll explain that in a second. But firstly, we don't need to win that we solve the affirmative impacts because materialism or focus on materialism is a link to the critique.
That's not my question.
Okay.
How does the critique explain the app's impacts?
Okay, so firstly, we don't need to win that. Secondly, if you assume that we should win that, it does solve it does explain it explains all violence insofar as I'll just explain from top down. Okay.
I don't need you to explain queer plus to me. I just want you to explain how it explains India and Pakistan.
So queer pest explains all violence. I'll explain why queer pest is true or where queer pest starts from.
So how does queer pest explain police shooting black people?
Yeah, sure. So deviancy from the Western man or deviancy as queerness is targeted as something that is or it's symbolic for something that is not productive to the future, which means those who deviate from the Western man or the idea of a perfect race is something that is
So how does that explain white people killing other white people?
Sure. So there's many different examples in which queerness could occur within different white people.
Or straight white people killing other straight white people.
Okay, I agree.
You said it explains literally all violence.
Yeah, it explains literally all violence.
So
I'm sure there's probably some deviancy in these examples.
Okay,
if you give an example of a Western man killing another Western man, then we can.
I want to go back to my original question. How does it explain India and Pakistan going to war?
Okay, I've explained this. All right.
Okay, if you're going to give the same answer, I'll ask other questions. What is futurism?
Yeah, the idea in which we can forward the political into a better
What's
material
the
state of
political?
affairs. The political, oh yeah, sure. I guess bodies like governments, the affirmative defense, or states.
So
science of future. No, they shouldn't forward into the political. They should do things like reject futurism or just completely
So what would be an example of a government rejecting futurism?
Just everyone engaging in political apostasy.
Is that what the alternative fiats?
The alternative does political apostasy. The alternative is like a form of queer negativity in which we reject things like futurism and just endorse a mindset or endorse a positionality of political apostasy.
4 minutes.
Just wanted to use your stand.
What were the NORVI ones?
A, it's illogical you don't win because you're being fair. B, sketchy debaters reading maximally abusive practices and prep out theory so that they can win on the RBI. Third is a substantive debate. If an RBI is present in the debate, we can never go to substance because everyone's just focused on winning theory, which means it's going to collapse and go down to substance.
Did you read the entirety of the Ekin card?
Entirety of which card?
Actually, it's fine.
Oh yeah, no, I sent you what I did, what I did read.
Yeah. T, the case, the QT.
Alright, is there like a dot?
Yeah. On the case, it'll be in the order of the advantage and then like all the method
Okay.
analytic stuff.
Sorry, give me the order again of the off case.
T case K.
Okay.
Okay, so. I'll let you know when I got it. Okay, I'm just Okay, I'm good when you're.
Cool. Are we good? Counter absence specifies state states existential pragmatics that way code PG all two states of the plural code may be state talking sense and ambiguous. The proper perceived to be temporary. This generic will be unacceptable. I mean specific instances prove generic. State all PG sensor exhibits are part little evidence be judged true. Minority birth life birth life on a controversial purely preference level should speech judge generic true is low. Error after most likely misinterpreted pair close right and pretend who whatever is highly conic spin rules for identified pair flow after decision 20%. Semantics first, it's a floor not a ceiling. If sufficiently predictable interpretation topic the finish ground is more important. We're 99% close to the topic, which means we don't justify completely deviating, which also majority of their offense. Second, they have zero reason the resolution is generic. Their evidence says there are two types of pair plurals. No reason that resolution is a generic pair plural. No new two in our sandbag. These identifies the sandbag. Third, no effective jurisdiction. Judge vote on us. Yes, all the time. Standards first. Class laws to go down through particular parts of literature. Laws for more nuanced base speech differences are different. Two background no advantage applies to all country picks. BC charges different geopolitical implication. Change picks are worse than aspects and negative generics like judgments and if you absent happy versus picks. Three, no limits exclusion. There are 9 states with nuclear weapons and no solvency evidence for any combination. Fourth, them to provide a case list with solvency evidence. It's obviously ludicrous because nobody advocates for the France and NOCO after the RBI's debate. They're not illogical. It's not saying vote for me because I was fair and educational. It's saying vote against them because they read a false shell. If they have a true shell, they should win it anyway, which answers their baiting argument. Will link to subject of education. RBI is deterred from this theory because it disincentivize the negative from throwing no nonsense, no risk frivolous theory arguments. And the 1 and 2, which is comparatively better, they put the cart before the horse. They lose subject of education anyway by introduction of theory. The case. Conceded subs-internal link Pakistani communication is terrible, which guarantees miscalculation during crises from jittery commanders who are likely to use nukes first in any sort of crisis because they don't know what's going on about them. Nuclear war does cause extinction. Their evidence doesn't assume it being used on cities and dense urban population centers in India and Pakistan, which guarantees firestorms that cause completely block out the sun and collapse the ozone layer, which guarantees everyone on Earth starves to death. The method to pop up if I drop some blip, you shouldn't evaluate it. None of these arguments are complete arguments, and the one is needed unless you have the complete arguments on your flow, you shouldn't evaluate them. And there's going to be tons of embedded clash. The winner is already time crunch, which means you should err against voting on some tiny blip in the one and see them reject the method stuff. The app is not about improving queer people's lives or progress. It just says that India, Pakistan, limiting their arsenals are good, which doesn't link to any of their state controlling deviancy stuff, the materials and stuff. There's no line for determining a material versus non-material impact. They can't explain the impact of the affirmative, which is what all their evidence relies on in terms of explaining root cause, which also justifies the permutation independently beyond the critique. The don't weigh the case stuff relies on winning a link, or that our epistemology is flawed, which was the root cause stuff above, which CX was embarrassing on. Fiat is illusory. Obviously, it's just a question of proving whether or not the affirmative is a good idea, which answers the slog evidence because it proves that we're not saying that voting out causes any sort of change outside the realm, rather than just we presented a good idea. It doesn't ignore complexities because we are solving the idea on a specific way in which disarmament would occur. The fiat double line doesn't make sense because the plan is just a normative statement, not pretending that we actually spill up the no perm stuff, or if we win the perm, it proves combining methods is better and it allows us to understand the intricacies of violence, which answers the methods debate. Will only extend one or will only make one permutation, which solves their infinite app conditionality argument. People find value in the status quo, which answers like doesn't matter. Nuclear would be absolutely horrific. Any risk they're wrong is sufficient to vote affirmative. Insofar as there's no risk, the affirmative makes it worse. The critique. Framework for the place against the critique, 8-point fairness, arbitrary fairness, when you see there, infinite parts of when you see lemmatized, which forces the winner restart scholarship is tied to the consequence of the plan to make no sense, it's a great assumption of implementation, fairness matters against competitive games, to foster valid discussion. 2, perm do both, do the plan and embrace this sort of negativity of the alternative that's comparatively better, it allows us to understand the specific ways in which forms of violence outside of queer pessimists are able to manage themselves, and allows us to understand the ways in which queer pessimists are able to explain all their violence, which is proven CX when they can't explain any of Indo-Pac's motivations. The death drive thesis outdated, that Smith 17 every second lived through attempt to capture a theory of development. Theories claim to describe universal development stage for a theory of models generally considered highly questionable. Theories being increasingly challenged are not possible to many short series philosophy without validation. Development in infinite research on psychology, also evolution, biology, capture the central basic but some deep contemporary theories which usually establish differentiation. While ever the performing attempt by electronics to deep and adequate ways get more up-to-date cross-disciplinary research for advice or literature and different stuff with different clinical practitioners. Second, there is through one reason has to be unresolved contradiction in force right not integrated logical systematical extinction outweighs precludes the possibility for any future value. They'll say futurism is bad, but we're not futurism. We're just saying that sort of preventing harms to people because of nuclear war is a bad thing, which is the only irreversible impact there. Alternative seeds of the political to right-wing people who will just make queer who will make queer violence worse. These people like Modi are just nationalists and do terrible stuff.
Okay. Wait, what didn't you read in the 1AR doc?
Starting prep.
Okay, wait, could you like send me your doc for the 1AR?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you mind if I like don't touch my computer, but like I start prep like having what you read the 1AR?
It should be prep.
Is that okay with you? Or like if you want me to take prep, I'll just like
Sure.
okay, thanks. Okay, so let me just open it. I'll start prep with it. Where are you 6-0? Oh shit. Alright, I just got it. Prep 4 minutes starting now. Can you explain the aft-ground argument?
In your interpretation, the negative can read picks out of specific countries. That's flips your limits offense and is
Cool. T. Oh, okay, there. It's gonna be actually T and then the F. Like the method stuff.
Is there a doc?
Pardon?
Is there a doc?
Yeah. Do you want me? I'll send it. One second.
Okay. Oh, you don't have to if it's not.
It's just like analytic stuff. There's like nothing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there
that's
is.
Okay. Alright. Is anybody not ready? Overview to the T debate. First, don't allow any new tutor or win because I don't have a 3 and I don't respond to. So everything they say is uncontested, which makes it impossible for me to win T. Second, T always all their arguments insofar as my strategy informed by the absence. So since the one C is completely reactionary, which means if the absence is fair, I have to do unfair strategy in order to respond on a reciprocal basis and be able to respond to have some substantive advantage. Also, answers your picks argument because they're what people read whenever they don't have the substantive answers. The they'll pick out of things like an agent, which means it's net. Or if there's a prima facie burden to be topical, which means there's no burden on the negative to be fair, which means that topicality is the highest in the on every aspect expected to be topical, which means if I win T, it concludes I waste all other argument. Now, secondly, we can send the interpretation of the violation. The argument here is that the negative should lose insofar as they did not. Insofar as they can see the affirmative made must not defend that all states ought to limit their nuclear arsenals to clarify. You cannot defend a subset of states in that violation that they specify. Now, the argument here is that they do not meet the only I mean they made is a textual I mean, but we're gonna go and give you that's why that doesn't matter. Now, firstly, the Symbian evidence, A point, the statement that birds lay eggs is a universal statement, which means that it can tolerate exceptions. It doesn't mean that you get to specify one thing. It just means all other things that picks tolerate. Also, secondly, this doesn't mean they meet the plan's bad fortune. Fine, I'll concede that you're semantically within the bounds of the debate. Now, it's the plan's good versus plan's bad. I'll concede pragmatics first, which takes out all their I mean arguments. I'll concede that they can see that they expect, and so that means that they're okay textually, but I'm going to win that they are unfair by specifying Indian Pakistan. Now, third is paradigm, so we're going to win that T is voting. The extent drop to be to sharp reduce in second or to also use a paradigm of a competing interest since reasonability is arbitrary, so Navada invites judge to this outweighs the arguments. There's no objective technical way to use reasonability if you wish to as reasonable as all of that the judge interprets it, which makes that run irresolvable and requires intervention. Always it comes first because it has to be a winner and loser. Competing interest results and always at least a recent topic which have the best source of maximize the quality of rounds and help and improve debate more. Additionally, uniquely on T, do not vote on reasonability because the context of the topicality can be reasonably topical. Now, fairness of voter and always the education. A point, the argument here said that their clash argument goes away because A point they've never impacted out that fairness in the 1 era, which means I don't know how they're going to be able to spin it out in the 2 era. So do not let me know. Secondly, we've never read education as a voter, which means fairness is the only voter. So that means it automatically goes away. Third is that you can say fairness is a voter because axiomatic to every combatant activity. And that means that it necessarily is a prior question to anything else, which means fairness is the only voter within this round. That means they'll concede jurisdiction as a voter and stuff. So now that goes on. No, we're gonna go for the limits and ground argument. The abuse story here is very clear. Now the argument is that we lose access to all of our arguments as far as that you can expect any combination of spaces, including Russia, Israel, China, and more, allowing any permutation of them exposed by prep burden. The argument here is that there's many different possible things that you could do, and after prep against many different combinations of apps individually, which massive schools engagement. You have infinite prep time to frontline your own app would be preferred for you. So, for example, there's 9, so like 9 times 9 is 81. There's 81 possible combinations of apps that could possibly occur, which means I'll have to prep for every single individual one of them, which means independently. This means that I lose access to it, which means they have one app since the beginning of the topic, whereas even if they say it doesn't explode, God, that means I've lost some fairness and I've lost some ability to engage, which means they will be ahead of me on the research debate. They will frontline their one app and frontline Indopac, whereas I will have a bunch of case tags and have to be able to go home every single day from school, prep, not talk to my friends, not talk to my mom or dad, anything. I'm just going to sit down and have to write prep outs to every single possible app, which means they will have the apps since the beginning of the topic and be able to just crush me on it every single time and write frontlines and limits. Argument here was considered, which means even if they get functional limits or even if they make the functional limits argument, it begs the question of functional limits even is, which means you should hold the line here and vote on limits if I have a risk of offense. The argument here is that the argument is just at best mitigatory defense if they say they don't explode limits. Now, the other argument here is that we're not going to necessarily go for ground, but the argument is that we've already won. Now, first of all, we've already won by your arguments are false on the clash debate. Firstly, turn, you're not excluded my ground by specking allows me to use a higher quality being quality prep and a lot better clash. Now, second is a turn, specking means after default is generic, like low clash, like Cabra Wilderson, which means there's no good to have any specific prep against your clash. So I won't have any topic clash. Also, this links to education. Nobody reads education is voter as so only I only read fairness, so it doesn't apply. You say Africa no advantage applies, which means picks are worse than the F. However, the argument here is that the picks argument is completely false. A point. You can see that you get 1 error 3 to check back. Make arguments why picks are bad. That disincentivize people from reading them. You can just win on that as well. Second is severance permutation solve just to become the counterpart or make it intrinsic terms. There's many different ways in which you can weigh against that. Third, you can read Kant, and method stuff where picks don't negate. There's many different frameworks that you can read in the one. You see that necessarily means that there's no
exceptions. Like intent-based asks me that picks don't negate means the question of the intention of the affirmative is good or not, which means that you can necessarily get rid of picks, but I cannot be able to get out of the things like an intent whenever I'm negating. Now thirdly, you can weigh the aff against picks, but I can't weigh the neg against the aff, which means that you can just say the thing that I pick out of. You defend the entirety of the aff, which means you specifying something that you got supercharged. If it's not equal, that turn this more instead for you to read picks like that into a plan S, because you'll just have accurate plan offense or other picks. You have no right. This independently outweighs all of your arguments. It means that we preclude because you have no offense on this layer. Let's go to the next level. Oh yeah, you can vote negative right here. We've already won T since we won that limits outweighs the standards that have counter interpretation, but we've already line by line them, which means that limits outweighs all the arguments because it begs the question if I could have engaged there. Arguments about picks and stuff, they say reversibility because they could have engaged in the or they couldn't have engaged in the pick. But the argument here is that the generic sort of things that they'll always have prep to, whereas they pick their own average, means they can weigh what they pick out of. They weigh the entirety of the resolution. If they lose to a pick, that means they would lose to a disadd to that part of the app as well, which means that it takes out the entirety, but also independently over their counter interpretation. We've already won as why topicality always everything. Yeah, also non-unique, you can just modify the text of the pick so it's where you expect, and even if the same case neg, you can read framework and method stuff to extrude like truth testing your con. So here's how you frame your topicality debate. Firstly, limits outweighs all of their arguments, which means it's a planned bad debate. They're going to try to go for an I mean in the next speech, but it's not a question of textuality. I'll concede that they're textually okay, but classify their pragmatics first offense, and I've won a risk of offense that proves that they lost them. Also, they've conceded that I lose ground because I don't get disads to things like the United States or disads to other countries, which means ground is also 100% conceded. Topical version of the app is also conceded, which proves that they could have defended the affirmative and been fair, which means if I win a risk of offense, you vote negative on T. Don't vote for Rex because Rex has rep. Vote for me because I've won the topicality debate. Let's go to the affirmative. Actually, no, we don't need to go to the affirmative. You can vote negative on topicality. I don't care about the RVI. I've won that we have a risk of offense on limits, and I've won that limits outweighs all of their arguments, because even if pick seems like something, the reversibility weighting is false, because there's many ways in which you can get out of it. Like you can like read a method app or like a con app where like picks don't negate. And yeah, just vote negative on topicality. Plan's bad.
109 or
Yeah.
case T. Are we good?
Case was conceded, plan solves, exchange I feedback to you. I win the debate. Vote affirmative because plans are good. The framing issues, if we win defense to limit it, means that Clash will outweigh all of their offense because every single answer they have made to Clash relies on winning a huge risk of a limits set, which they simply have not done because they completely drop functional limits. Even if hypothetically there exist 81 affirmatives, none of those affirmatives will be read because nobody advocates for random combinations. There's a reason why people have stuck to mainly 4 different affirmatives. That's because those are the only affirmatives that have literature. I gave the specific example in the one area of how nobody advocates for random combinations like France and NoCo because there's no like sort of security relationship between the two of them or no unifying advantage, which proves that the only apps are written in the context of dyads like India or Pakistan, or it's sort of trilateral between US, Russia, China, etc. Those apps haven't even been written because nobody advocates them, which proves there's an extremely limited case list under the world of R integration, which is also proven by the fact that R integration still mandates that the affirmative defends multiple countries in conjunction, which means it's not 512 or 81 or whatever affirmatives because they can't defend individual countries, rather they have to defend a combination, which means they have to defend find a combination that actually makes sense in the context of literature, which is extremely limited given that there are only 9 states with nuclear weapons. They consider a framing argument from the one era that the 2 and R should be forced to write a case list of arguments and solvency evidence and prove that those affirmatives do exist. The examples they give were just Russia, Israel, China, which is literally 3 affirmatives, which if you can't prep for, you deserve to lose the debate. Yes, the affirmative has infinite prep, but the negative has the negative has a variety of arguments they can make against those affirmatives. Our model of debate is one in which maybe there are probably 5 different major affirmatives because they simply do not have a case list which still allows sufficient negative preparation. Even if I get to frontline 1 app, they get the opportunity to still prep, and if we've won sufficient mitigation, their offense, it proves they still have the opportunity to engage. It's not holding the line. This was all stuff that was in the 1 era in our functional limits block, and it was just completely dropped by the 2 and our risk of offense is sort of a bad framing because if the risk of their limits to set is so low, that means they don't access any of their turns to clash and to access a very minimal internally to their fairness arguments. The clash standard proper, their top 2 arguments are rely on winning limits because it's their arguments that they're going to default to generics in a world in which they aren't able to predict or prepare for the affirmative, but that assumes that the case list is so unpredictable and large that they're unable to prepare. If we won our defense, it proves that they can have a substantive strategy against the Indipac app and they have tons of ground. Just because they don't get the United States that doesn't mean they can't make great arguments like the China dissent, the tactical nuclear weapons pick, etc., all of which prove there's value to be had, but our clash internally outweighs because only our information allows us to go into intricacies of specific countries like India and Pakistan, which best reflects the way in which the literature discusses these arguments. The only way to win this debate is this link to education argument. 8 point is just because I didn't explicitly say the words education of voter doesn't mean it's justified. The 1 and C internal link to fairness was that it kills participation in the activity, which is also obviously true. If debate is completely devoid of any sort of educational value, nobody would participate. B1 is our clash argument. It does link to predictability, or it does link to fairness because it controls the internal link to predictability because it's based on the ways in which the literature discusses different topics, which is an internal link to fairness, and proves their interpretation vastly over limits, forces us into one affirmative that isn't reflected in the literature, which makes AF wins functionally impossible, which is an internal link to fairness and is justified, which means 0 risk of limits to said, any risk for offense outweighs.
Wait.